Welcome to Health and Wellness, where we offer integrated solutions for personal and financial retirement planning for medical professionals. I'm your host, Michael Swartz. In last week's episode of Health and Wellness, we completed our background and context conversation. We've touched on the history of the modern retirement problem, how many financial planners isolate retirement planning to financial planning, and the history of retiring, the day you retire, and retirement. And with all that knowledge in place, we can move on to the first active engagement chapter of the book, the phase of retiring. Retiring is phase one of the modern retirement journey, the final years of your career where you actually step down professionally from the roles and responsibilities that you have as a practicing physician and begin creating a transition plan into retirement. And to do that, not only do we create professional closure, but we actually create a positive personal trajectory into retirement. So rather than waiting until you retire and move into retirement and title yourself as a retired physician, what can you do in your final working years to create that professional closure and that personal development that will lead you into a self-guided transition into retirement? That's what we'll dive into here in Chapter 5. The most challenging part of the chapter, however, is the transition from working and retiring into retirement is a transition unlike any other. Yes, we can recall a different transition in our past that certainly has some similarities, like graduating from medical school or moving from residency into your first years as attending physician. Let's look at transitioning from medical school into residency. Yes, you'll have a dual sense of identity from student to professional and professional to retiree. There'll be social and personal changes, moving from education into practice. You're closing one chapter of finishing a degree or finishing a career and developing the next chapter of a purpose-driven career with tangible direction, maybe a fellowship or a specialty, and building a purpose-driven retirement. And of course, there is uncertainty of the future, where you'll be long-term in your career and where you'll be long-term in your retirement. But although the education to career and career to retirement transitions have very many similarities, there is one glaring difference. A physician's entire life is structured for them until they reach their retirement years. Their education and careers provide so much rigidity in their life path that the change is relatively structured ahead of them from education to career. But if everything changes at retirement, because of that, so much in retirement is unknown. One hospice physician shared this reflection on their career. I've seen this behavior in many patients, especially my hospice patients. It's as if they believe that if they just don't talk about the reality of their situation, it just won't happen. But as I've contemplated my own retirement, I realized I was treating my transition in a similar way. Maybe if I just ignore it, I won't have to deal with it. That can create a myriad of issues when you transition into retirement. Ignoring it, neglecting it, will mean that you have an ineffective transition into retirement. In fact, this was part of the outdated retirement journey. A professional career remains such until the day a physician retired, creating the retirement cliff. What can you do in your working years to create not only professional closure, but develop your personal sense of identity outside the role of physicianhood? That's what we focus on while we are retiring. The major difference between the education to career and career to retirement transition is that nothing is structured ahead of you in retirement. Nothing. Retirement is a blank slate, that tabula rasa, and you alone will be responsible for answering the question, what's next? To do so, we need to evaluate some of the factors that influence the duration of retiring. Some physicians said 2 years was plenty of time. Some physicians said a full decade was necessary to transition into retirement. Here's the factors that influence that duration. How much of your identity is truly defined by your career as a physician? The tenure of your physician career, the prestige of the position you are retiring from. If it's a CMO position or a department chair, it might feel a little bit different than being a provider who works outside of administration. Also, the title, roles, and responsibilities of your position, the longitudinal or acute nature of your patient relationships, whether that's clinic versus hospital or a consult service versus family medicine, where you've known these patients for virtually your entire career. Also, the relationships you hold with your colleagues, teams, and of course your patients, and some personal attributes, like what is your predisposition to spontaneity versus predictability? How comfortable are you with the status quo? How familiar are you with creating change? And of course, self-confidence and self-awareness. Finally, spousal, partner, and familial considerations. This can create one of the obstacles in retiring. When do you choose to engage in the retiring process? Well, you can start by recording your wake-up calls. This is the first activity that we introduce in Chapter 5. What are the wake-up calls that are beckoning you to take on an active role in your retiring process? Maybe it's relational and environmental. A friend or coworker retired and it got you thinking about your own retirement. Maybe somebody asked you in passing, how many more years do you have at the hospital? Maybe your spouse, maybe your family members have asked you. Or maybe there's something else. Maybe it's an indicator that your psychological and cognitive heart isn't quite as in the career as it used to be. Maybe you see less and less familiar faces in the hallway. Whatever it is, there will be wake-up calls along your retirement journey that encourage you and beckon you to taking on that active role in retirement. With those wake-up calls in queue, you'll know that you need to start planning your retirement. The question is, where and how do we do that? The answer lies in our second activity, the Retiring and Retirement Wheel of Engagement. We've identified 12 specific life domains that are massively affected by the retirement transition. These include your physical, social and community, relational, financial, familial, and productive pursuits or imaginatory, spiritual life and greater purpose, intellectual, environmental, recreational, and emotional domains. When you take a look at a wheel of engagement, say a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these 12 domains, how satisfied are you right now while you are working? And then project how you will feel about these 12 domains in retirement. So we want to reflect on our current state and then identify what is it in our career that is providing us this level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction in this specific domain, and how will retirement change that? Then you can do a deeper dive into each of these domains. Which are most important? Mark them with a plus. Which are least important? Mark them with a minus. Where would you like to be less engaged in retirement? Maybe your productive pursuits can finally take a step back and you can find some time for rest and recovery. But maybe your spiritual life can finally get taken off the back burner and go from a 5 to an 8. Where would you like to be more engaged in retirement? Mark those domains with an up arrow. Where would you like to be less engaged? Mark them with a down arrow. We can reflect on how we feel and the material integration that our career has on our lives, and then project that into retirement and compare and contrast how this transition will affect it. You will be aware of the changes that are coming and that will hit you in retirement. And you can make some changes in your life today to prepare for that. This will expose a massive integration between your life and your career. And this brings us to our third activity, the why of retiring. What is it about your career that has provided you a sense of value, identity, and purpose in your life? Would you say that in your career you've actually let your internal compass rust? It's gotten a little bit stagnant because you're so busy working on something external that you've slowed down a little bit on your internal awareness and growth. We call this the rusted internal compass. It's the far left side of the spectrum that a professional career in medicine has on an individual. In the middle of that spectrum, we actually see individuals adopting the professional identity and purpose and values of the healthcare system that they work for. I am a doctor at so-and-so healthcare system. If that's the case, your identity, purpose, and values are actually integrated into the healthcare system. It's the most common spot. It's the center of the bell curve for physicians in medicine. And then at the far end of the spectrum, which makes the retirement transition particularly challenging, is corporate Stockholm Syndrome. So corporate Stockholm Syndrome is actually defined by James Ulrich, a psychologist, who published an article in 2022 that said, because so much of our self-worth in modern times is defined and derived by our work, we are at risk for experiencing corporate Stockholm Syndrome, which can be defined as employees of a business beginning to identify with an employer who is demanding overly long hours and generally ignoring the well-being and emotional needs of the employee. If that doesn't sound like the general environment of the modern healthcare system, I don't know what does. And for the retiring physicians, this presents a uniquely significant challenge. To tear yourself away from the corporate Stockholm Syndrome or the adoption of identity, purpose, and values from the healthcare system, or even to polish your rusted internal compass, you need to identify and record your top 5 personal values. This is our values-based exercise. The way to generate your values is to reflect on a challenging period in your life and imagine that you're standing beside yourself and offering wisdom. What values are guiding that advice? Maybe reflect on a peak experience in your life. What values are being expressed? What made this moment memorable? Then think of a conflict that was extremely challenging for you, where you had to come head to head with somebody in your life or something in your life that wasn't working the way that it should be. What values were being challenged in that time? What will you stand tall for to defend and protect and promote? These are your values, whether it's teamwork, integration, spirituality, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, generativity. Whatever these values are, record them in a hierarchical fashion. In the retirement workbook, we actually provide an appendix in the back with a list of examples, and you can always Google or run on the internet and get a list of values to help yourself generate some ideas of what your top 5 values will be. But once you define them for yourself, you will no longer be dependent on the healthcare system or your role as a physician to provide your values on your behalf. With your values in place, we move on to developing your purpose and identity statements. Your purpose statement can be developed by answering 4 questions and writing out a 3 to 5 sentence response to each. What makes you come alive? What are your innate strengths? Where do you add the greatest value? And what metrics do you use to measure your life? After providing a 3 to 5 sentence response on each, you can go through and highlight and identify the themes and the common elements. And you can use these themes to identify 3 to 5 elements and core purposes in your life. Maybe it's service, development, values, honesty, and truth. And after identifying those core elements of your responses, you can use them to craft your purpose statement. For example, if your 5 core elements of your life purpose are service, development, growth, value, and honesty and truth, your purpose statement may be to serve myself and others by consistently developing my knowledge and abilities in an honest pursuit of achievements that align with my 5 core values. This may be your purpose statement. Next, we move on to the identity statement. The identity is the around-the-clock, 24/7, every day of your life ideal of who you aspire to be. You can create your identity statement by completing 5 sentences. I am here to, I am strongest when, I am inspired by, I am dedicated to, and I am at my best when. When you finish each sentence, again, you can take out the 3 to 5 core elements and identify your identity statement. I am an honest, genuine, generous, strong, and positively impactful person for every life that I interact with. That's just an example. The benefit of going through the exercise of identifying your values, purpose, and identity is that you reclaim personal agency over life. You detach your identity, values, and purpose that you formerly had with your career. It is a healthy evolution, much like a teenager outgrowing their parents' home, in the sense of moving on to the bigger and better life that lies beyond your career. After generating that positive trajectory for your personal journey, we can revisit professional closure. To generate professional closure, we want to identify the milestones of our career and then generate a professional bucket list. When reflecting on your milestones, you may answer the following questions. What are you doing differently in your life because of your career in medicine? What thresholds have you crossed? What were the life-changing moments of your career? What new worlds did you explore within yourself because of your career in medicine? What achievements are you most proud of? And what can we do to celebrate these milestones? We can record up to 20 different professional milestones, the highlights of your career, and then we can compare and contrast these milestones with the following questions to generate a professional bucket list. What are you working on professionally that you'd still like to complete? What have you always wanted to finish or achieve before you retire? What roles and responsibilities do you need to delegate before you retire? What changes would you like to make before you retire? What do you anticipate that you will grieve leaving behind in your career? What can you do to proactively heal the wounds that retirement will inflict on your spirit? What will you miss most about your career? What can you do to reconcile some of the turmoil that you carried with you throughout your career? Are there apologies that need to be made and forgiveness that needs to be offered? And finally, how will you process the grief of ending your career and transitioning into retirement? Use these questions to generate a 10 to 20 point professional bucket list. From that bucket list, distill 5 simple statements that inform your response to, in 7 words or less, what will create a process of retiring that is meaningful, supportive, and satisfying. We want a synopsis, a very brief cliff notes, if you will, of what your retirement process looks like. This is the framework for developing your personal generation and creating professional closure. Finally, to tip the scales in favor of transitioning into retirement, we have one final activity: push and pull. Imagine a scale. On the left side of the scale, create an inventory of events that align with the following statements. Career pull factors. These are elements that are pulling you into your career, that keep you tethered to your role as a physician. It might be the social interaction, the complexity of patient care, solving problems, healing human beings, the positive elements of your career that keep you excited to go to work each day. These are your career pull factors. And on the left side of the scale, you will also add your retirement push factors. Maybe it's financial concerns. Maybe it's a lack of identity. Maybe it's the unknowns of retirement. Both the career pull factors and retirement push factors will tip the scales in favor of continue working. This is the left side of our scale. On the right side of the scale, we have transition into retirement. On the right side of the scale, opposite of the career pull factors, you can have an inventory of career push factors. These are elements that are pushing you out of your career. In general, the pace of patient care was one of the top concerns, the stressors of the job, the bureaucratic issues that continue to develop as healthcare systems become larger, and the stress and technology of the career. These are the career push factors that are going to tip the scales in favor of retirement. And equally so, are retirement pull factors. Maybe it's the travel, maybe it's the freedom, maybe it's revisiting a spousal relationship or a spiritual journey that's been put on hold for your career. These retirement pull factors also go on the right side and tip the scales in favor of transitioning into retirement. So on the left side, we've got our career pull and retirement push factors. And on the right side, we've got our career push and retirement pull factors. And we can start to do an inventory of where most of our life is centered. And over the final years of your career, watch as the left side of the scale becomes lighter and the right side of the scale becomes heavier, tipping us in favor of transitioning into retirement. What this will do is provide clarity for you to say, it doesn't just feel like the right time. I know that the right time has come for me to retire. Which brings us to Chapter 6, the day you retire. Thank you for listening to this episode of Health and Wellness. As always, I'm your host, Michael Schwartz, certified financial planner and healthcare peer coaching practitioner. If you're looking for more help or additional resources on your retirement journey, please visit healthwellness.com or send an email to hello@healthwellness.com. We'll see you in the next episode.